we're so close that I don't stick my hand fully out because I'm worried if I extend my arm all the way out with the bear spray, he'll knock the can out of my hands. That's how close we were. Wow. And I'm trying to spray him on one side, and when I put the can on that side, he ducks to the other side of the tree. So we're going back and forth and back and forth. And I could see one of his eyes, I think it was his right eye, it was swollen shut from the bear spray already. And then finally I deked him out and I shot him in the face with the bear spray. Some of it, I mean, we're really close, we're like a meter away. And it bounces back in my face too. I get it in one of my eyes and it blisters. And
hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Facing Giants, where we explore stories of struggle, strength, and resilience to help you against whatever giants you may be facing. Today we'll be going over another story of a bear encounter with Rob, and I'm very much looking forward to this story. How are you today, Rob?
I'm very well, thanks.
Good. Tell us where you're from and where you grew up.
I was born in Brandon, Manitoba, and then we moved at an early age to Rainy River, Ontario, but I grew up in Thunder Bay. So we moved here when I was before kindergarten.
Nice. How do you like Thunder Bay?
I really like Thunder Bay. I mean, some people don't, but I'm a biologist and I love nature. And for me growing up, it was a sort of a small town vibe. And so there's easy access, a bike ride away to, woods in the wilderness. But yet it's big enough to have a university and a college and, some decent eateries. And so some of those amenities of a larger city without having to commute. So I really like it. My family's here. My wife's family's here. It's a great place to raise kids and have a business if you're a biologist.
Right. For a lot of the reasons you just mentioned are the same reasons why I like it here and why my family likes it here too. Yeah, growing up in Toronto, I was always very frustrated with how difficult it was to access the outdoors. You'd mentioned you're a biologist. How did you know you wanted to be a biologist?
Well, I always wanted to be a biologist for as far back as I could remember. So when I was knee-high to a grasshopper, I was out chasing grasshoppers. And I was fortunate in that I had parents that were supportive. So there was a string of garter snakes and bats and birds and tadpoles that shared my bedroom with me. And I had tolerant sisters as well, fortunately. And so I always wanted to be a biologist. I grew up reading Gerald Durrell's books. Unfortunately, things fell in place that I did my undergraduate in biology at Lakehead University and then went on to do my DPhil at Oxford in zoology and then came back to Canada after that. I worked briefly for various levels of government on short-term contracts and then started an ecological consulting firm with a friend of mine.
That's pretty cool. What does the average day in your job look like?
It really depends the time of year. This time of year in the winter, I'm doing a lot of data analysis and report writing, summarizing either my own data that we've collected the previous field season or other people's data in sort of a review reports or a synthesis. And then from sort of April through October, I'm away in the field probably at least half the time. Some summers like constantly. So I'll be out literally being that 7-year-old boy, counting birds, looking at fish, surveying woodland caribou by helicopter. So doing a wide range of things. Pretty much if it lives or crawls or swims, I'm interested in it, and I'm out usually counting or somehow assessing it for clients that range from government to industry to private landowners.
Right. On a previous, so before we jump into the story, I had one question that I've always wanted to ask you. So from this podcast that you were on previously, you had mentioned that there was white-nosed bats and there was like a decline in the species population.
Oh, and so that would be white-nose syndrome. And so that's an invasive fungus. Well, that's the name of the syndrome associated with this fungus that came over to North America, probably on some cavers' gear, and then it spread from where it got introduced in New York, and it spread across North America. And what it does is it likes to grow in caves and mine shafts where it's just above zero and pretty moist. And that's unfortunately also where a lot of our native bat species hibernate. And so it'll grow on bats on their wings and on their bodies, and then it irritates them. And then they wake up in the wintertime. And when they're doing that to groom or because they're irritated, then they burn up their fat reserves that they need to make it through the winter. And so there's been a calamitous decline in these bats that overwinter in North America. So like in some populations, 95% or greater mortality.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's really tragic. And bats aren't like mice and rodents. They're the same sort of size, but a mouse can have generations really quickly and their numbers build up really quickly, whereas bats take a long time to mature and only have one or max usually 2 pups a year. And so they take a long time to rebound and increase their numbers. So
right.
Yeah.
So well, I totally messed up the name there.
That's okay. As a non-biologist, it's only becoming more broadly disseminated in the public and people are becoming more aware of it. So
right. So you obviously care about this to some degree. You care about the population of bats. But I wonder, to the average person, why should the average person care about the population of bats or worms or mosquitoes or? Yeah,
well, there's on many levels people should care. I mean, the animals and plants that share this world with us have their an inherent right to live and carry out their life processes and not being wiped from existence. So there's that sort of moral ground. There are often, canaries in the coal mine, indicators of the health of our environment, which ultimately will eventually impact us. So way animals respond to climate change, and some of them are quite sensitive. It's a harbinger of what may be coming down the pipe for us. And there's, practical applications, like for instance, in bats, they consume thousands of mosquitoes and other insects a night. And so do a real ecosystem service, which although doesn't show up in, government accounting ledgers, it's, collectively is really important to our lives and our economies.
Right. I feel there's a plug for like lakehead biology in here somewhere. Maybe we'll put that at the sign up for lakehead biology program. Yeah. So let's get right to the story here. So from what I understand, you had an encounter with a bear. Now, I don't know what the technical definition of encounter means, and I think Laura and I talked about this for a bit, but what did that day kind of start like before anything went wrong? Like, what was your objective? What were you setting out to do, and what brought you to bear territory?
Okay. Well, I was doing some bird monitoring and bird surveys for a proposed development, and I was in northeastern Ontario in a fairly remote area. So I was working alone that morning, and I parked my truck, and then that was just after sunrise, early in the morning, and then I was walking through the woods and stopping at set intervals about every 250 meters, and then doing a point count for birds. So basically sort of documenting by sound and sight all the bird species and the number of birds I could see in a 10-minute period. And so I was walking through the woods using a GPS to navigate, and I did that until the survey period in the morning was over. So about 4 hours after sunrise, you stop because the birds aren't really calling. So that was about 9:30 in the morning that I finished with my bird plots and was about to walk back to my truck, which is about 3 kilometers away at that point.
Was this something you were doing on your own?
Yeah. So there was 4 of us out in the woods that day, but not working together. So Brian was going to meet me at my truck at about 11 o'clock when he'd finished his bird plots, and then driven with his vehicle to over where I'd let him know I'd be parking my truck. And there's another couple of us on another area. We're all staying at the same cabin, but we're at different spots during the day. So I was doing what I often did then, and working alone in the woods, which was pretty common for me to do.
Mm-hmm. And is it uncommon for you to bump into bears in your line of work?
Well, not uncommon. It's not common. Like, I don't see them every day. I'd seen dozens of bears over my career and prior to working. I mean, I'm 58 now, and much of my career I've worked in the boreal forest and recreate in it all the time, but I don't see them all that often. Up until then, I'd seen probably hundreds of black bears over my lifetime.
Cool.
Yeah, but it's unusual to have problems with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so seeing them, I would classify something as an encounter where it's something that's more than just a casual sighting of a bear that then runs away.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. At what point did you become aware of a bear's presence?
I was sitting on a stump in this opening. So it was what we call a beaver meadow. So it was a former beaver pond that the dam had burst and it drained and had been revegetated by sedges and grasses. So kind of like a small open field, kind of hummocky from the sedges. And there was a small stream running through the middle of it. And I was sitting, just pulling together my field notes, about ready to head back towards the truck, when on the other side of the beaver meadow, so about 80 meters or so away, I saw a black bear come out of the line of alders, so these tall shrubs that line the edges of these beaver ponds. So I'm coming out. I wanted him to be aware that I was there. And so I stood up and I waved. I had a little lumbar pack, like a bum bag. I waved that over my head and yelled at it so it would know I was there. I didn't want it to stumble across me, like continue on and then, be surprised by me and perhaps elicit a defensive reaction. So that, it's quite normal for it to run into bears like that. But as soon as I stood up and he saw it and became aware of me, what was unusual is that he started running towards me. So that's not my regular morning. And a few years earlier, we had been chased back to the helicopter by a grizzly in British Columbia, and then had a very tense encounter with another grizzly in northern BC, a female grizzly with cubs. And so after those two close calls, I'd done a fair bit of reading about bear biology and bear encounters, particularly Stephen Herrero is a prof out of Alberta who's written a book and a bunch of published literature on it. So I'd done a fair bit of reading, and when the bear started accelerating towards me, it quickly went through my head what are the sort of types of scenarios that you run into bears and how to react. This is ripping through my head really fast. All the neurons are firing, and it's like, okay, I don't have food, so it's not a bear that's, habituated and coming after my cooler in the campground. I didn't come across him suddenly on a trail, so it's not a defensive reaction. It's not a mother with cubs, so that's not at play here. And it kind of leaves one left, which is it's a predatory attack. So it's like, wow, game on. And so the heartbeat was off the charts. I'd never sprayed a bear before. I had bear spray with me. After the encounters with grizzlies out west, I started routinely carrying bear spray with me, which we didn't always. And actually, one of the grizzly, when we got chased back to the helicopter, we'd forgotten the bear spray in the chopper. So it's not something that I was doing anymore. So the bear was running towards me on the other side of the stream, and I thought I didn't want to have to spray my first bear ever with bear spray while it was running full tilt at me. So I thought I'll meet him at the creek, and maybe it'll slow him down a bit like a moat. Then he won't be coming quite so fast at me. So I run over to the stream. It's kind of halfway between us. And by then he's already at the stream. And I thought he would just plow through it because it was only maybe 1.5 meters wide and maybe that deep at its deepest point. Not much of a barrier for a bear. They can swim quite well. Mm-hmm. So he's on the other side, kind of running back and forth, looking where he's going to cross. And I'm making myself look as big as I can. I'm like 6'2", and I'm not very heavy, but I'm at least tall, and I was roaring at him, and I wasn't phasing him at all, having no impact on him.
Was he a sizable bear?
What's big, eh?
Right. Especially with bears.
It was small. I'm scared of a 70-pound pit bull. Right. And this bear is 3 or 4 times that size, right? It's over 200 pounds. It's a full-grown bear.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, is it, so to the common idiot, bears are omnivores, which in our brains, bears eat berries. And bugs. That's what it means, right? But is it normal for bears to pursue prey? Like, will they eat other living animals in the wild? Yeah.
So it depends on the bear species, but black bears, they are omnivores, and actually they get a lot of their calories from vegetation. So like out in the spring, you'll see them grazing on grass and clovers on the side of the highway because it greens up early there. They eat a lot of berries. That's a real big determinant of how well they do and how much fat they put on before winter is, the amount of blueberry, whether it's been a good blueberry crop that year or raspberries to a lesser extent. But they are opportunistic, and I mean, they will kill moose calves. They will take advantage of other opportunities. I mean, they obviously, eat small mammals and stuff that they can, if they're, rolling logs and come across them. So, and they'll eat fish if they can get it. So, but they will test out potential prey. And if it, doesn't fight back enough, doesn't dissuade them, then they look at it as a potential meal. And for humans, it's very rare, but it tends to be, the literature supports that it's mainly sort of young male bears. And in recorded history, there's been 63 at the time when I read the paper. So maybe max 70 deaths from black bears in North America. So it's not really all that common. It's the farther you go back, the fewer records there are, but that's still less than one a year on average. And much higher odds of getting hit by lightning. Right. Podcast 11. So it really doesn't happen that often, but it'll test you. And if they think they can take you, then they might.
Right. Because I'm thinking like a bear knows that if it's taking on something that's alive, especially something that weighs more than 20 pounds, there's maybe like a little bit of risk involved. There's no risk with berries and grazing. So to flip psychologically to take on risk, I wonder if it's like a scarcity thing or it's got to meet its dietary needs to get some iron or some sort of whatever it doesn't get from vegetation. I'm wondering.
Yeah, well, I think they're just opportunistic. I mean, if they can get meat, it's a bonus. And in the spring, that's when they typically hunt moose calves. If they do, not all black bears hunt moose calves, but some tend to do it more often than others, and it might not specialize in it, but might do it more often than their brethren. But I've also had bear encounters in August during a really good berry year. I was thinking, oh yeah, this should be good. No problems. Look at all the blueberries. Not going to have any problems with theirs this time. But twice it's happened on June 9th where I've had bear encounters where I've had to spray bears.
Yeah. On June 9th.
On June, same day. Yeah.
So you stay inside on June 9th.
Yeah, everyone asked me June 9th, how was your June 9th this year? So now black bears aren't the biggest thing in the woods. So they go after moose calves, but they usually wouldn't try to take on an adult moose who can defend themselves well with their hooves or their antlers. So there is a bit of risk of getting injured, and wild animals generally don't like to get injured, especially predators, because it makes it harder than to hunt. Yeah. And so they test you to see how dangerous you are and whether it's worth it. And that's only the bears that actually give it a run. Lots of bears that have encountered humans and had negative interactions with them, they run away. I mean, most of the bears I've run into have run away from me, right? Without having to be aggressive. They when they become aware of me, they're hightailing it. But there's not all of them.
Right. So you're reviewing your stuff for the day. A bear comes out of the woods. He starts chasing you. You run to a creek. You meet the bear at the creek. And what happens next?
So we both run towards each other. We meet at the creek. After I fail to intimidate him at the creek, I can see him bunch up, and as he's about to spring across the creek, so I take a couple steps backwards because I don't want him to land on me. And he jumps across the creek, and I spray him at maybe 2 or 3 meters away and spray him in the face, and he immediately jumps back over the creek. So I only spray him for a couple of seconds because once he turns around and jumps across the creek, I stop spraying them because there's no point spraying his butt.
Yeah, you better save that thing.
Yeah, save that. I only have like 7 or 8 seconds of spray. Let's keep it for when I need it. So I run back. I figure, okay, we're good. I run back to where I'd left my bum bag. It was still open. I had my field notes out and stuff because I just like kind of dumped it on the ground when I saw him coming. And then I pull out my Leatherman normally I carry a sheath knife with me. Like it's got a 5 or 6 inch blade. I had it on my other pack that morning. At the truck, I said, oh, what's that? What are the odds I'm going to need this? It's too lazy to move it with the, with its case from the strap on my backpack to the strap on my bum bag. And I did not have it with me. So I have this Leatherman. I pull it out, nice little tool, pull it out and go, oh man, this blade is so puny. It's like 3 inches long.
A toothpick.
Yeah, but it's like, that's all I got. So, and then I don't want to lose my data. So I zip that all up. I put it back on. I look up and the bear is back at the creek. And it's funny how your brain's just firing, right? Because I'm thinking about, oh, there's that guy I heard last week on CBC radio. He got mauled by a bear near Cochrane, where it dragged him out of his, was ripping him apart and it was scalping him in the ditch after he busted into his cabin with him. And he survived. He got saved by a couple of passerbys, but he was being interviewed on CBC. And I was just thinking about how painful that must have been as he was being scalped, and you can feel the teeth grinding against his skull. And it's not like, it wasn't that I was scared of death. It was like, it was going to really hurt dying.
Yeah,
right? And
totally.
I didn't want that. I really wanted to avoid that. And then I'm thinking about a friend of mine who had died tragically from an infection and left another friend of mine with his wife with his young boys. So she was a widow with a couple of teenagers. And I was thinking, I don't want to leave Lana like that with my kids and be a widow and no father. And this is all like firing through my head, like all this sort of life flashing before your eyes. This is what's going through my head. And like, oh, this has got to really work right, because it's going to really hurt if I don't,
Totally.
things don't go perfectly. So the bear's back at the creek. So I run back to the creek, and he's again looking to where he's going to jump over, and I'm roaring, and that's making no impact. And then he jumps across again, and I let him have it a second time, right in the face, a couple meters away. And then I retreat back to where I had my stuff. I mean, my bum bag is on me now. I've got a cruising vest that I'm wearing, and I get back to where I had been, and the bear is recovered, and he stayed on this side of the creek now. I'm standing there, and he's circling me, and he hasn't given up yet. And then he's trying to circle me and get behind me and then sneak using the shrubs. I mean, they're just little leather leaf, and, Labrador tea is like, 2 feet tall. I know you're there, bear. Like, I have not forgotten.
Yeah.
And he's trying to sneak up. I mean, I turn and face him, and then when he gets close enough, like 5, maybe 7 meters away, I charged him with a bear spray with my hand, holding the bear spray out front. And by now he doesn't like the bear spray can. And so when I got closer to him, as I'm charging him as he's trying to sneak towards me, and when I got within sort of 3 or 4 meters, he'd like turn around and run away from me, and I'd chase him for a couple of meters, and he'd keep going, and then I'd stop and I'd retreat back to where I was. So we did this for, I don't know, 5-10 minutes maybe. And
Probably felt like hours.
It felt like forever.
Jeez.
In fact, I'm going, oh man, if I trip, because it's really uneven ground, if I trip, I'm gone. He'll be on me so fast. And so I really didn't want to chase him too far. And I'm going, man, this is not a tenable situation, because sooner or later I'm going to trip and it's going to be game over. And I think, oh man, I got to document this, because then my wife and the authorities will know, what killed me, how big the bear was, that it was a bear. It's like, in retrospect, yeah, dude, they'll figure it out, right?
Yeah.
If they find my body, they'll see I'm being ripped apart. But at that time, it seemed really important. And I had a little point and shoot camera for work in one of my cruising vest pockets. It just hangs there. So I took a picture of the bear while he was standing there looking at me, getting his breath. And so we did this for, I must have charged him and back and forth maybe 10, 20 times. And I wasn't getting anywhere. Anytime I tried to, I had a GPS unit on, and it run a track. So I had a line on the map that I knew I followed to get in here, and I knew if I followed that, it would take me back to my truck. So it helped in terms of navigating. So I knew where I came out of the woods. The only time I could go forward, if I ever tried just to walk without, and that when the bear was sort of, on the other side, then he'd quickly charge me and try to get me from behind, like as if I wasn't paying attention. And I realized, like, the only time I could actually move forward was when I was chasing him. And
So was the bear in between where you wanted to go?
Well, he would circle, like he circled me many, many times. And so eventually while we're doing this, I waited till he had lined up in the direction I came. And that's when I decided I'll charge. When he came forward me, I charged him that way. And so I could chase him in the direction I wanted to go. So I chase him with the bear spray. After he comes towards me, I chase him in the direction I'd come. So I get through the alders. We get into a sort of low jack pine forest, and it's kind of a mossy bank to get up into the forest itself. And I'm on my hands and knees, and I'm chasing the bear on my hands and knees, and he's in front of me, and I spray him again, and he peels off for a bit, and then I get up on my feet, and I can get into the forest itself. And he hasn't come back to me yet. Thinking, oh man, maybe I'll climb a tree. And they go like, no, that literature says that's not a good idea. Mm-hmm. And the bears can climb way better than you. And people have got injured or killed being pulled out of trees. Mm-hmm. And it's a boreal forest. Like, you ever try to climb a jack pine? There's like no branches. It's not like an oak tree.
Yeah,
it's like total non-starter. So it's like, okay. And then, so we'll just stay on the ground, stay the course. The bear came back, lined him up in a direction I knew I wanted to go. I charged him. He gave way. So I got like 10, 15 more meters and stuff. And then we get into the forest. And then he comes at me. And he's maybe 15, 20 meters away. And he stands on his hind legs. And seems like he's frustrated. And there's a stump, and he hits the stump a couple of times. And he woofs. That's the only time I heard him say anything the entire time. And then he charges me, and I charge back at him. And he goes behind a jack pine. And so he's standing up, and I'm standing on the other side of the jack pine, like closer than me and you.
No way.
And he's holding the tree with his claws, and I'm right opposite. We're so close that I don't stick my hand fully out, because I'm worried if I extend my arm all the way out with the bear spray, he'll knock the can out of my hands. That's how close we were. Wow. And I'm trying to spray him on one side, and when I put the can on that side, he ducks to the other side of the tree. So we're going back and forth and back and forth. And I could see one of his eyes, I think it was his right eye, was swollen shut from the bear spray already. And then finally I deked him out, and I shot him in the face with the bear spray. Some of it, I mean, we're really close, we're like a meter away. And it bounces back in my face too. I get it in one of my eyes, and it blisters and runs. That's sort of when it seemed to lose a little bit of the interest, a little wind out of his sails. But he still wasn't giving up.
Wow. Let me cut in here for a second. What was your state of mind during this whole thing? Were you hysterical at all? Were you pretty focused and able to concentrate and be intentional about your actions? Or did you feel like frantic and...
Stone cold killer, man.
Okay.
Yeah. The heart was definitely racing, right? I mean, it was a high adrenaline situation the whole time. I mean, you always hope that you're not going to embarrass yourself, right? There's no one else to see how you react, right? So you're just embarrassing yourself, right? And you hope that you'll rise to the occasion, whatever that is, pull someone from a burning car, or do the right thing, stand up to a bully, or whatever. It wasn't being a hero. I'm just trying to save my ass, right?
Yeah, totally.
I was really excited, like really revved up, like my heart was pumping, but I wasn't afraid. I was acutely aware that everything had to go perfectly, or it was going to end really badly. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want it to end badly. Death is okay. And once you're dead, and, it's hard for the people living, but for you, it's, it's just the end, right? But dying, I really wanted to avoid. That was going to be really painful, and I didn't want to. So I'm not very courageous on that side.
Yeah, especially after you made him work so hard. If he got you.
Yeah, so he probably wouldn't be very happy. Not that there's much to eat on me, but he's probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
But it was just focus on, we got to do this right and keep our cool and dissuade his bear. Show him that I mean business, and that it's not worth the risk. And hopefully he'll go up. So this is, I don't know what stage this is 15, 20 minutes have passed probably. And of this back and forth. When I didn't pay attention to him, he would try to use the cover in the forest and then sneak up on me from behind. And then I face off with him, and we'd kind of dance, and he'd circle around. And when he was lined up where I knew I'd come from, because I could check on my GPS, it was in my chest pocket and my cruising vest. And then I could charge at him that way. And then so I would pick up sticks as we went along through the woods and throw them at him. And I was just yelling at him the whole time, like, fuck you, bear, fuck you, I see you. And then he would he would drift off to the sides a bit, and then I'd follow my track, and he would parallel me, like anywhere from like 20 to 50 meters. And then at any time, if I wasn't yelling at him or it looked like I wasn't paying attention to him, he would, like a flash, come running in from behind using the cover, thinking that, okay, he's not paying attention to me now, I got him. And then I have to like face off to him, turn to him, roar at him, circle around. And I'm like throwing sticks at him. It's kind of awkward because I had my Leatherman in one hand and my bear spray in the other. And I wasn't going to let go of the bear spray. I didn't have very much left. I knew because I'd sprayed him 4 times. And so I had maybe one last spray and I was hanging onto it in case he got on me, in case I tripped. Because I knew if I tripped, I was in serious trouble. If he got on top of me and I had to spray him like when he's right on me. Otherwise, I'd pick up sticks and then hold them in one hand with the Leatherman, and then I'd get a chance. I'd switch the Leatherman together with the bear spray and throw the stick at the bear. A couple of times I actually hit the bear in the ass as we're walking through the woods, and he would run a little faster, but it wasn't enough to really... No. I mean, I'm throwing with my left hand. It's not all that good. So we did this. It was a kilometer and a half through the woods. I basically chased him. And that was 45 minutes from when I first saw the bear.
Wow.
Yeah, because I took a waypoint where after finally the bear seemed to get less and less interested in me. And then finally he kind of peeled off to the side. When I was walking back, I was following my track, but then trying to keep closer to, keep in the open parts of the forest so he didn't have as much cover to come in, so I could see him coming. And then he peeled off and he didn't come back. And so I still had another kilometer and a half to the truck. So I'd walk and, 10 or 20 meters and stop and turn around and make sure he isn't trying to circle back and, use the cover and he thinks that I'm not paying attention to him. Eventually I had a stick in my boot. Eventually got to take that out of my boot because sure as hell wasn't taking that out when the bear was around. Eventually made it back to the truck, and that was almost 11 by then. And Brian had just arrived. I could hear him at the truck, and he's coming into the woods, and I'm yelling to him, bah, bah. I could barely speak by then because I've been yelling at this thing, swearing at him for almost an hour now. And he's going, bear, where? And no, the bear's gone now. Yeah. And so they made it back to the truck.
Now, at any point, did it ever seem or feel hopeless, or were you making enough like incremental progress that you felt like you were getting somewhere?
Yeah, it never felt hopeless. It felt life-threatening. I mean, I always felt like at the start, it was like, first time I sprayed him, it was okay. This is new. I haven't done it before, and I expected the bear to go away after that. And then it was like when he came back to the stream, it was like, yeah, this is real. This isn't a bear that's easily dissuaded. And so I didn't feel hopeless. It's like, okay, I'm not being ripped apart, so it's working. So we'll keep doing it, right? And then it's kind of trying to problem solve, right? Like, okay, I can't go directly because he'll just chase me, so I'll chase him. I can move forward when I'm chasing him, so somehow I gotta chase him. So gotta keep him between me and the truck, and then I'm running in the right direction. And then it's just like being really careful about not tripping, because then I think that might have been a different ending to the story if I tripped on there. Once you had the bear on you, because the Leatherman wasn't really going to help much.
No, it'll tickle him.
Yeah.
So there's 2 things I've heard: grizzlies play dead, and any other bear fight for your life. Like the fight for your life approach, how useful would that ever be against a determined bear? Is that a real option?
Yeah, that's a real. It's a real option. So there's actually more than just the 2 bears. Like polar bears,
right?
Yeah. I mean, they give you the heebie-jeebies. I mean, you better have a firearm with you, right? They can use bear spray. But for grizzlies, there's so much bigger and stronger than us. You really have no chance of fighting off a grizzly. So your best course that's recommended is to play dead, and they hit you a few times, and then hopefully they let you go. Or they think you're dead, and they might cover you up with some debris and leaves and might come back to eat you later. Or maybe it was a defensive reaction and they hit you a few times, and then the female thinks her cubs are safe, and so there's no more threat. So playing dead is removing that threat to them or to their cubs or to their prey that they've, that they have and that you've come across them with. So for grizzlies, if you have a lead time, you can climb a tree. They don't climb very well. They're pretty heavy. So if you have a big enough tree, that is an option. But if they do make contact with you, then you can't fight them off. There's not, and if you try to, you probably just get them angrier and they'll make double sure that you're dead. Whereas black bears, I mean, they're still way stronger than you are, right? Like I've seen bears flipping stones where I'd then gone to afterwards and I could barely budge them, right? And they're flipping them with ease. And that wasn't even a huge bear. I mean, they're so strong. That's what they do for a living, right? So they're really hard to fight off. So that's why having bear spray is a really good option. And so I didn't have to fight it off, right? I had bear spray. And but as a kid, I'd already, I played through those scenarios in my head. Okay, what if a bear gets you? Actually, when I was a kid, it was a cougar because I'd read something on like Reader's Digest or something about a guy who fought off a cougar and he'd stuffed its hand down its throat and basically choked it on its hand or something. I mean, it was one of those Reader's Digest. I don't know how much of it was true, but I'd played through these scenarios of what do you do, and then when I did field work in Africa for 2 years, right? Or 2.5 years. And we had a spear and we gone through the scenarios. Okay, if we're charged by lions, are we gonna throw the spear? Are we gonna plant the spear and let it, jump on us and the spear? Or what's thank God we never had to put that to the test.
Right.
So I, kind of run through those scenarios in my head over, the course of my lifetime. But I mean, reality is that bears are really strong. And if they have you on the ground and even if you have a weapon, it's still a Hail Mary, right? I mean, their eyes are pretty small, they're pretty solid, and they've got not only their teeth but their claws, right, and their weight and their strength. Yeah. So that's why I was really careful about not tripping. Yeah.
So you make it back to your truck. Brian's now at the truck. The bear is gone. Describe your feeling, like how relieved were you that it went the way it did? Because it probably went as well as it could have. You lost your voice maybe, but maybe some cuts on your foot from that blasted stick. But like, describe your sentiments once you made it back to the truck.
I was tired. I was mentally wrung out, man. It was a high stress environment for better part of an hour. Or actually more than an hour. I was still stressed even after I lost contact with the bear or lost sight of the bear and it actually got back to my truck. So I was dripping in sweat. And it was kind of like this big kind of relief, kind of wash off that, okay, the flight or fight and that, those stress hormones can kind of tamp down a bit. Assume the adrenaline's, kind of all used up by now.
Yeah.
Just glad that, worked out all right. So it's like, okay, we're done for the morning. I don't feel like we need to go do it. I mean, it's too late to do bird plots anyways. So we went back, we caught up with Al and Steve, the other guy with us at our cabin, and explained what happened. And to Al's credit, he said, anybody who wants to go home right now, no shame, you can go back to Thunder Bay. And it's like, yeah, well, I'm not going back. I mean, the woods will still have the bears.
So you finished the job?
Well, like the rest of the day, I took the rest of the day off. We actually went, we didn't have cell phones or we didn't have coverage. It was 10 years ago. So we had a cell phone. We had no coverage. So we had to go and find a landline and then report it. On that road, the previous day, it wouldn't have been that morning because it was too early. But the previous day on that road, we'd seen people in the area. There were some high school students that were driving there to swim, I think, in a river that was a little farther up the road. So I didn't want anyone else to run into this bear who didn't have bear spray and wasn't expecting it. I was, because I was really fortunate that it worked out, but there's no guarantee. So we reported it to, the only number that we had was OPP. So we reported to the OPP. And they eventually reported to M&R, and I got interviewed. A few days later, they managed to catch up with me. But so we took the rest of that day off, and then like Al, I'm partner in the company too. I could have gone home if I wanted to, but he was preemptive. If any of you want to go home, not just me, but the others. But we still had work to do. I think this was, we still had like another week's worth of work out there. It wasn't going to do it itself, right? It needs someone to do it. But on a bigger scale, one was I wanted to get back on the horse, because if I didn't want it to dwell on it and then make it harder to go back in the woods. And the other thing is, like, even aside from work, I love recreating in the woods. I love being in the woods. I love being in the woods alone. I like walking at my own pace, stopping when I see an interesting bug, or picking it up if I want to, go a little faster, and just being out there, nature bathing, whatever you call it, but just communing with the natural world. And I don't want the bear to take that away from me. So it's like, we'll go back out there, but we're going to work in pairs.
Great. That's kind of not surprising, like entirely surprising to me, because of what the outdoors means to you, what your work means to you. And I'm assuming, of course, but it sounds like these are things that are very important to you, and they add to your quality of life, so much so that removing them was almost not an option. I know I would guess for a casual user of the outdoors, if they had a similar encounter, I wouldn't be surprised if they never went where there wasn't a sidewalk again, right? But this was the big thing that intrigued me about your story, was that it didn't take you long before you realized that you weren't going to run from the woods. You weren't going to change your jobs. You weren't going to change your hobbies. And would you say safely that it's because of what the outdoors means to you, what your work means to you, and things like that? Or is it just your general approach not to be fearful, not to let fear lead you and rule over you in your life?
Well, I think probably all of the above. Yeah. I mean, nature is really important to me. Being a biologist is a core part of my identity, and something I always wanted to be. And I try not to let fear rule my life, I guess, but I also have to put it in perspective. Like, the odds of being attacked by a bear, and I guess you can't really call it an attack, because depending on how you define it, because it didn't actually make contact, but you could say it was a predatory encounter. The odds of that are vanishingly small. So from a scientist's perspective, it's really quite unusual. I mean, there's probably, although there haven't been that many people killed, there's far more close encounters that never, people get injured, or they don't get injured, but they have had close calls, but they're not tabulated in any sort of scientific way. I mean, it's easier to record kills or deaths because they end up in, hospital statistics and stuff like that. So there's probably more close encounters than you think that are recorded. But even still, it's still a vanishingly small chance. And so it's a 100% chance I'm going to miss the woods if I don't go into them. And really unlikely that it's going to happen again. I mean, the odds were 1 in a million or whatever they were that first time. That's why I thought it was good on June 9th the next year. But so I'm truly, and I've had to spray another bear, and I drove off another one with a rock since then. So I've had like sort of 6 or 7 close encounters with bears. Yeah. Rather than just sightings.
And how many of those were subsequent to this story?
So the 2 grizzly encounters were beforehand, and then one other black bear one where I threw rocks at it to drive it away, which I wouldn't do now, given what I've read and experienced since then. I wouldn't have been so cavalier with the bears. But since then, the following year, I got charged by a predatory bear that I had to spray. Similar sort of thing. It didn't last very long, but I was out by myself bird monitoring in a remote location. And ironically, the next day I was going to be interviewed by M&R for use in their bear safety training videos. So, about my encounter in Folliette and the usefulness of bear spray. And so on the drive up to my study site the day before, I've been running over my story, reliving it in my head to make sure I could sound at least somewhat articulate. And that morning when I was out doing the bird monitoring, and it was kind of an overcast day, and so I had my hood up and it was drizzling a bit, and pretty dense bush and a cutover and some and some remnant forest patches. And I heard this little crack of a twig going. And it was maybe sort of 80 meters or so in front of me up to the right. And I hear this twig snap and then nothing. And immediately I pulled out my bear spray and my knife. This time I know a little Leatherman. I got the big boy.
Good.
And then I wait to hear, because normally you hear like a branch break. You hear a bunch more as like the moose or bear runs away. And there was none of that. And it's like, maybe I'm just being jumpy because I've been reliving this, for the whole drive up, the 3-hour drive the day before. And then I hear a noise behind me. And I turn around and at at 4 o'clock, there's this bear, a big bear, like bigger than the one before, coming at me. Ears up, no noise. And I go, fuck, not this again.
you really said that.
Those are my exact words. And at the time, I didn't realize it was the exact same day a year later. But the bear is coming at me, and then it slowed down a bit as it's going through some slash. So there's some logging debris, some branches and stuff, slowed it down a bit at about sort of 5-7 meters. So I let him have the bear spray there. And then he swung around, he circled, and he looks at me, and then he looks away, kind of looks at me, looks away, like he's trying to decide, is it worth it? And then I roar at him and charge him a bit, and he circles a bit more and do that 3 or 4 times. And then he's actually the opposite direction from where he came, and I charge him, and he leaves.
Man.
And that's when I say, okay, we're done for the day.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, still had birding window, but that was it. I'm done.
Yeah.
And then I walk back with my hood down this time, stopping and looking to get back to the truck. Fortunately, I'm only 200 or 300 meters away. I'm not that far from the truck.
Mm-hmm.
So I had that one. And then I guess 5 years now. So 5 years later, I had one where I'm out by myself again. I still like being in the woods by myself. But now I carry, if I work by myself in a remote location, I have 2 bear sprays in case I run out. And a bear banger. It's the one that you shoot up in the air and it makes a sound like a shotgun. So it gives extra noise. Yeah. So I was in a pretty dense bush out by Lake of the Woods, and I hear this kind of woofing, sort of snarling sort of noise coming towards me, and sort of maybe 80 meters, 100 meters away in a gap in the understory, because it's pretty dense bushes. I see a bear running towards me, and that's, I guess, who's making the noise. And right behind him's like another bear, like 2 bears. And the second one's bigger. And I'm thinking, they're both coming for me. And I'm like, I'm going to buy all this. I know better. Like, I'm so embarrassed. Like, I know they don't hunt in packs. I know they're not both coming for me. But, right, it's just like, here we go again. So my bear spray was already out. And as soon as I saw the bears, I popped off the safety off it. And then, like, literally seconds later, like 5 seconds later, they were booking it. This first bear goes whipping past me. There's a little gap in the understory, in the beaked hazel, and I see him maybe 10, 15 meters go running right past me. He didn't even know I was there. And the other guy, the bigger one, was obviously chasing the smaller bear. So they'd had some encounter, and he was running him off or trying to kill him or whatever. And he sees me in the gap, does a 90-degree turn, and comes right at me. So you figured I can't catch this other guy, I'm going to take it out of me or whatever. But he comes right at me, and I had to spray him at like about 5 meters. And then he peels off. It's like really dense. I can't see him. I don't know if he's given it up, and I don't know where the first one is. And so I set off the bear banger. There's a little bit of a noise as it accelerates. It leaves the holster that you shoot it from, and then it goes up in the air about 50 feet, and then it goes off. And when the bigger one went off, the bang, I could hear more noise in the bushes from this original direction. So I think the smaller bear kept on going, and the big bear went back the way it came. It accelerated after it heard the bang. Yeah.
Man, so one of these experiences would be enough to put most people off. And now you've described, I think, 5 total, maybe 6.
And wait, there's more.
Oh,
that was only the first 2 bears of that day. That's just my all-time record.
So this is in the same day. So
that same day. So I go, okay, that's it. I'm not going that way anymore. So I'm going to take a break. I went back at about 10:30, went and had lunch. And then I thought, well, it's like 11 o'clock. I still got to do these rare plant surveys. So Al's out for the day. So somewhere else. And this is that good bear year. So, we thought we had no bear problems. So I go back out and I stick closer to where our cabin was along sort of the shores of Lake Superior. And it's kind of fairly open bedrock and jack pine and oak. And then I see this big bear, and it's maybe 100 meters away or so. It's got to be 300 pounds. It's a huge bear. And it sees me, takes one look at me, and just starts torquing it. And it runs away, and I go, yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be. Yeah, nature,
all his friends.
This is the way it's supposed to be, right? Yeah. So carry on. And it kind of, it's restored my faith in the natural order. And then I've gone as far as I want to go, like an hour or so later, and I'm working my way back, and there's this sort of bedrock ledge, sort of small cliff, maybe 2 or 3 meters tall. It's kind of this ridge running along with, I'd scrambled down on the way out, and I've kind of just about reached it on the way back. And then I don't know if my spidey senses were tingling or I heard something. Anyways, I look over, and on the top of the ridge, there's this bear, another bear. It's not a big bear, maybe 100 pounds, a little bit more, 150.
And this is the same day.
Same day. Yeah. This is like,
so this is your fourth in the same
fourth,
day.
same day. And he looks at me, and I yell at him. He doesn't go anywhere. And so I sort of charge the base of the cliff. Well, it's not really a cliff, a little rock face. And he kind of backs up from the edge, but he doesn't leave. And it's like, maybe he doesn't think I'm very big because he's up above me and I look small, not as intimidating. And I go like, I don't want this guy trying to take a run at me when I'm not paying attention, right? When he lays the table, I want to do it on my terms right now when I can control the situation a little more, at least be aware of him. So he's not like he's getting me from behind when I'm not paying attention or where it's bad ground for me. And so I clamber around the backside of the cliff and back up to I'm on the same level with him. So I make him I look bigger now. I'm not like a little ant down below. Mm-hmm. And then I chase him I charge him, and he scrambles down the rock face. And then he's at the bottom of the rock face, like 2.5, 3 meters down. And he's still looking back up at me. Like it's trying to decide whether I'm tasty enough that it's worth to give it a go. And it's like, can't really spray him very easily from up above down onto his head. And this is still day 1 of our 10 days out there. I'm going to run out of bear spray at this rate. So I grab this big rock. It's like a 15-pound rock. And then when he's looking at me, looking away, trying to decide, then I basically put this rock down on the back of his neck, and then he takes off.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So that's the last bear encounter. That's about 5 years ago. That's the last one I've had to dissuade.
A few questions come to my mind after hearing all these. Like anyone listening, and probably your wife, is wondering what is wrong with you.
You know what? My wife bought me these bacon underpants, and upped our life insurance, and ever since then it's been downhill.
Oh
yeah,
my
I know.
Goodness.
I'm really lucky. I have a really accommodating wife. After the encounter in Folliette, we worked in that area the next day, not that exact same site. We moved to a different area where presumably the bear wouldn't be. And then in the end, we ended up relocating down towards Espanola to work on another project for the rest of the week. And eventually CBC Radio caught up with me and they wanted to interview me. They had, I guess, heard from M&R and through the grapevine. And I had to say, I'll agree to an interview, but I got to call my wife first. Because I talked to her on Monday and I told her I had a run-in with a bear, but that's about it. Mm-hmm. And I said, I don't want to have her hear the whole story, on the air, because she's pretty good about not worrying when I'm away. I mean, we lived in a tent in Africa for 2 years and have had lions, meet a ewe away pushing to get into tents. So she's pretty cool and collected, but I don't want her to worry. But fortunately, she doesn't worry too much. And I can carry on to be a bio.
Now, the last thing I'd want is anyone listening to this to be hesitant or afraid to go into the woods.
Absolutely not.
Because there's so much there that many people could benefit from. And your life would be so much better if you spent more time in the woods. I think that for most people.
I 100% agree. And the odds of you getting into trouble with a bear in the woods are vanishingly small. Mm-hmm. You're more likely to get hit by a bus. Literally, statistically speaking, you're more likely to get hit by lightning.
Right.
So the way I look at it is the benefits far outweigh the disadvantages, and you're more likely to trip and get hurt, right? Than to run into a bear that's predatory. And that's really, like, at least in black bear country, that's really the only one you need to worry. You don't even need to worry about. You just need to be aware of and, take reasonable precautions. So like carrying bear spray is one of them. Especially if you're in a big group, it doesn't matter. But if you're working alone or in pairs, carrying bear spray is a wise route.
Yeah, I think most people aren't going to be going where you and Laura go by themselves in particular. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind for anyone listening. And then, yes, if you do come across a bear, there are things you can do to protect yourself, because you've seen at least, you said over 80, I think you said 100, and you're still sitting here. You've chased off 6, if not more, and you're still sitting here. And I think you're just a testament that bear spray works. And I'm the guy that goes hiking and puts the bear spray in the very bottom of my backpack, if I even bring it, right? So no, after speaking with you, after speaking with Laura, I definitely am more conscious about bringing my bear spray with me. And I've got this big knife now that I carry with me. But yeah, I think the mere fact that you've continued to go back into the outdoors, into these remote places where there are going to be bears, I think is a testament to how awesome outside is, and how much it can mean to people if they experience it the right way. Yeah, I just wanted anyone listening just to know that, like, this is a rare thing, but if it does happen, and it could, let's not lie here, there's things they can do to protect themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. Spending time in nature, it refreshes the soul. I mean, that sounds maybe kind of trite, but it is so wonderful. I mean, except when the mosquitoes are really bad, don't get me wrong, but it's so good for our mental health and our physical health. And we're fortunate that, realistically speaking, in Canada, it's pretty safe to go in the woods. And with a little bit of planning, it's like the Scouts, plan for the worst, but hope for the best. Right. And you shouldn't let it take away from your appreciation of, even when you are out there. And I try not to. And I've had more than my fair share. And I mean that like in a statistical sense. I'm like that extreme tail end of the bell distribution. The vast majority of people never have problems. Right. Yeah. And yet here I am.
And here you are. How does that encounter in particular, but all your close encounters where you've actually had to spray a bear, how does that affect you today, if it does at all?
I have to say it makes me more grateful for what I have, for having had the opportunities to be out there. I won't lie. Because I've had more than my fair share, I'm probably more vigilant in the woods than the average person. And I'm definitely more vigilant or situationally aware than I used to be before. I really didn't worry too much. I mean, I did the standard sort of bear safety stuff, but for 40 something odd years, I never carried bear spray, which I now do routinely. And statistically, it's probably never going to happen to me again. Like, lightning only hits so many times.
Those
right?
bacon boxes.
Yeah, exactly. People have become more, in society, more risk adverse, right? We've bubble wrapped our kids and stuff. And so generally speaking, we don't work alone as often. And we definitely don't work alone at night. I used to do that. And I don't do that now unless I'm right beside my truck. And we work more in pairs. Not always. Depends on the situation. But a lot of clients require that under, like workman's comp and, health and safety plans. But the thing is, you can still recreate in the woods by yourself. I still continue to. So I just take a few precautions. And the main ones are, I let people know where I am going to be going and when I'll be back. So that's what you should do regardless of bears, right? You could trip and fall and hurt yourself, or your car could break down. It's good for people to know. And then Depending on where I am in the group size, I carry bear spray. If I'm by myself, I absolutely do. And if I'm working remotely, then I carry 2. And most people don't carry 2, but given my history, it's fair enough.
Right.
And that summer after the first one, I worked only in pairs. Like I hired my nephew just to watch my 6. I mean, we're walking through the woods. I said, I'm bending over looking for rare plants. You got one job. You're bear bait. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess I've got one last question. So the name of this podcast is called Facing Giants, right? You're up against an opponent, figuratively is typically how I frame it, but you're up against an opponent that your odds look slim, but turning and running isn't the solution. And in your scenario, you were faced with giants that you had to deal with. And I think fear is inherent in those circumstances. And I know before you didn't quite think your story fit, but I think it fits very well because here you were in these circumstances where you weren't sure you were going to make it home, but yet you refused to run from those circumstances. Some people may think you're a fool for doing it, but I think it's courageous, especially because when you re-enter the environment, you are prepared and equipped to manage the circumstance if it were to ever arise again. Now, the question I'm going to ask you is, what have you learned about fear and fear's place in our lives when it comes to struggle from this circumstance? If you could tie that all together.
I'm not good at expressing it, but I mean, there was fear. Not so much fear of death, but fear of pain. How's that? Definitely that summer, and it's gotten less over time, but there's still pangs or twinges of fear when I go out to the woods, or anxiety, maybe a little bit stressed sometimes in certain situations, particularly if I'm alone and, the bush is dense and, you can't see as well as you'd like. I still do face that at times. Most of the times I don't think about it. It doesn't sort of bubble to the surface. Not that I'm hiding it, but sometimes I have to go back to basic principles and, okay, I'm prepared. The odds of a bear are really low. They're not 0, but I'm prepared as best as I can to go out here. And the calculus is that the pros outweigh the cons, whether it's work or play. And just kind of talk myself through it and then, take a deep breath and plunge back into it. And then usually the fear kind of melts away after a while once you get back into it. But it doesn't happen all the time, but certain occasions it does. I'm not really sure what triggers it, but fear is there. And it's, evolutionary speaking, it's probably, we have fear for a reason, right? It warns you of danger to yourself. And then you have the inability to pass on your genes if you're dead. Right. So kind of take it through the lens of a biologist. Fear is a good thing. And I tend to trust my gut, such as it is. If something feels off and it doesn't feel right, then sometimes I'll pack it in. And I had one in that last time I was out when I ran in, at the end of that time when I'd run into the 4 bears, and that last day I was working alone a long ways in the bush and run into a whole bunch of sign that there was a big bear in the area by the size of the fresh scat and logs ripped over and stuff. And then I was just like, I don't really need to do this plot after all.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like this. I just don't need this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes it's not fear. Maybe it is a bit fear, but it's also this sort of, I'll run the numbers here. Risk reward, and that it's in the area and I don't need it. So,
right.
Yeah. So it does. Sometimes it does change my behavior, but yeah, I think you have to face your fears, because otherwise, if I just, said, oh, I'm never going back in the woods again, then I'm not who I am. And then the bears won. Not that they're, not that they're my enemy. I still like seeing bears and stuff, but I just want to see them on my own terms.
Totally. Yeah. Cause this circumstance or the lessons from this circumstance could be superimposed onto so many things that we come across in our lives. Like if your kid came to you and said, hey, Dad, there's a bully at school. I don't ever want to go to school again because they beat me up or took my lunch money or whatever. Or maybe it's public speaking, or maybe it's, just a lot of the lessons from your story are superimposable to many other aspects of our lives. I think you've got a great story. And I think it's amazing that you continue to go where the danger is, and it sounds like you're thriving in that environment. You don't absolutely hate it. Like sure, like your stomach drops out sometimes when you hear a twig snap or something, but I still think you can find joy. I still think you do find joy being out there by yourself, knowing that bears are around you. And given your track record, man, I would, if I were the owner of a bear spray company, I'd be looking to sign you for a commercial or something. But
yeah, I'm either the luckiest guy in the world or the unluckiest guy, or maybe both.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out if I wanted to go hiking with you or if I didn't want to go hiking.
I've had a lot of people say that.
Yeah.
Funny you mention that.
Yeah. No, it was great talking to you, Rob, and thank you so much for sharing this story. Man, I love these like bear stories personally. You've just added another drop in the bucket for how I should manage things that I'm afraid of, and running away from them is probably not going to serve me well long term.
Yeah, I think that's good insight.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much for talking to me,
nice talking
Rob,
with you, Craig.
And I'm sure we'll see each other around.
Pleasure.
Thanks again for listening and for supporting the show. Stay tuned for more empowering stories. If you have any questions for the guests or feedback for the show, email them to facinggiantspodcast@gmail.com. And be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram as well.